The CEO of Sterling Reed Enterprises, my husband, found out I hadn't been to work in 3 weeks. His secretary, trembling, said, "Your first love fired her. A long time ago. Didn't you know?" That morning, as I sat in my office surrounded by stacks of files that rose past my knees, the hum of the HVAC was so quiet it sounded like a shallow breath. I'd asked a question that seemed perfectly ordinary, yet it silenced the entire floor. I looked up from a prestigious financial report, pen in hand, glanced at Peter, my executive assistant waiting by my desk, and asked casually, "Peter, where's my wife's time card report for this month? Bring it to me." Just one sentence, but I saw the color drain from Peter's face. He was a sharp, resourceful guy who had been with me for 3 years, accustomed to my explosive tempers and my terrifying silences. Yet that morning, the moment he heard my question, his hand tightened on a folder so hard his knuckles went white. His lips moved a few times, but no sound came out. I set my pen down and frowned. "What is it?" Peter swallowed hard. I remember that dry, rasping sound, as if a stone had been lodged in his throat for a long time, and I had just accidentally touched it. "Mr. Reed," he stammered. "Anna, she hasn't been to the office in 3 weeks." I thought I'd misheard. 3 weeks? "Yes, sir." I didn't know. "Did she request time off?" Peter's head bowed, his voice dropping so low it trembled, the words stumbling over one another. "It wasn't time off. 3 weeks ago, Miss Vance signed the papers for Anna's termination. I thought you knew." The pen in my hand dropped onto the mahogany desk, rolled a short distance, and left a thin trail of ink like a crack racing straight toward my eye. I stared at that ink trail for a long time. For some reason, in that instant, I felt something familiar yet intangible had just fractured right in the middle of my quote, meticulously ordered life. My wife had been fired, and I knew nothing about it. "My name is Alexander Reed, 32 years old, CEO of Sterling Reed Enterprises, a family conglomerate with its headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. Outsiders often say I have everything a man needs to stand firm in this world: family background, money, education, appearance, and the cool detachment of someone accustomed to living at the top. I've heard those words so often they've become background noise. But among all the things people thought they knew about me, there was one thing even I never imagined I'd have to face in stunned silence. It turned out I had never truly understood the woman who had been by my side for 3 years. My wife's name is Anna. We married 3 years ago in a ceremony so small it hardly resembled a wedding from a family like mine. No throngs of guests, no press, no lavish reception at a 5-star hotel like my mother had always dreamed of. Just a quiet dinner at home with a few close family members and 2 marriage certificates laid side by side on the table. That day, Anna wore a simple cream-colored sheath dress, her hair in a low ponytail, her face almost bare of makeup. When I asked if she would marry me, she just looked at me for a long moment and then nodded. No questions about why, no questions about the future, no questions about whether I loved her, just a nod. At the time, I thought it was a form of peace, of ease. A woman who was quiet, uncomplicated, undemanding, who didn't interfere with my work, who didn't require me to waste energy coaxing or explaining. I had mistaken that for the perfect fit for me. Looking back, I understand now that the most terrifying thing in the world isn't noise, but a silence that stretches on for so long that you forget the person behind it is still made of flesh and blood, with sorrows, with wounds, with dreams that have never been asked about. Anna started working at the company not long after our wedding. It was my mother's idea, and a suggestion I'd made offhandedly during a family dinner. Maybe she should work at the company just to have a place to go. I hadn't thought much of it. The administration department needed someone at the time, so Anna was placed in a comfortable position with a decent salary. Her official title was administrative assistant. To put it bluntly, it was just a chair set, aside for the CEO's wife. Everyone in the company knew Anna was my wife, but no one really treated her as anything significant. They were polite to her face, but whispered behind her back Some said Anna had hit the jackpot, a girl from a quiet neighborhood in Reasons, Queens who had married into the Reed family. Others said I'd married her just to defy my mother. Some even claimed Anna was just a placeholder for someone else. I heard it all, but I never explained, because I've always believed explanations are a waste of time. And Anna, she never uttered a single word to defend herself. At the company, Anna's direct supervisor was Michelle Vance, the head of administration. Michelle was 2 years younger than me, the daughter of a Parian Marianne, longtime friend of my family. She was brilliant, sharp, and meticulous, a fast worker who was especially adored by my mother. For years, it was an unspoken understanding that Michelle was the kind of daughter-in-law my mother had always wanted. It was never said aloud, but in families like mine, some things are understood without being spoken. I understood. Michelle understood. My mother understood. Perhaps only Anna remained silent, as if she understood nothing at all. 3 weeks ago, on a normal Monday morning, Anna was called into Michelle's Ware of Trees office. Nearly an hour later, she came out, returned to her desk, and quietly packed a few personal items: a worn canvas tote bag, a simple white ceramic mug, a small succulent, and a few books with frayed corners. A curious colleague asked, "Are you moving to a new department?" Anna just offered a faint smile. "No, I'm leaving." Then she left the building. No tears, no arguments, no pleading. It was as if she had been preparing for that day for a long time, and for 3 weeks no one told me. Human Resources didn't report it. Michelle, I didn't say a word. My mother didn't mention it, and Anna herself never brought it up, even though during those 3 weeks, I called her twice from Chicago and San Francisco between my relentless business trips. Both calls were as brief as, always. "Is everything okay at home?" "It's fine. Remember to eat on time. You too." That was it. A 3-year marriage where the conversation between two people was confined to a few sentences like that. Before, I thought it was normal. That day, for the first time, I found it terrifying. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tapping lightly on the desk, listening to my own heartbeat, heavy as a fist on solid wood. Michelle signed the termination papers. "Yes, sir." The official reason from admin was that Anna violated the protocol for receiving partners, which affected the company's image. Peter's voice was a whisper, but everyone in the department said it wasn't serious enough to warrant immediate termination. I let out a humorless laugh, a chill spreading through me. Anna violated protocol for receiving partners. A woman whose job consisted of booking, meeting rooms, printing documents, and ordering coffee and pastries. What grave error could she possibly have committed that required firing her on the spot? Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Come home for dinner tonight. I need to talk to you." I stared at the message, a strange feeling creeping into my chest. Since when could a matter concerning Anna pass through so many hands, with her husband being the last to know? Or, to be more accurate, in everyone's eyes, I had never truly been Anna's husband, just the master of a convenient arrangement. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "Tell Michelle I want to see her." Peter nodded quickly and backed out. The vast office suddenly felt unnervingly silent. Outside the glass walls, the June sun poured down on the dazzling city. The traffic below still flowed. Life went on. Contracts were waiting for my deepal signature. Meetings were scheduled one after another as if nothing had happened. But I alone knew that, starting that morning, a door in my life had creaked open. And behind that door lay not just the matter of Anna being fired, but a secret that had been buried for 3 years. A secret about this marriage, about my mother, about Michelle, and about the old wooden box I once accidentally saw in Anna's drawer late one night. Inside was a faded photograph of a strange man standing in front of a house in Savannah. On the back, in her grandmother's shaky handwriting, were the words, "One day, you must know who you are." That night, I had placed the photo back in its spot and never asked a word. Thinking back now, I realized I had been wrong for a very, very long time. Michelle entered my office in a beige pantsuit, her hair in a neat bun, her makeup flawless. As always, she wore that soft, familiar smile, the kind that made you feel everything was under control. But that morning, I no longer saw that smile with the same unconscious trust. She placed a file on my desk. "Alex, you wanted to see me?" I didn't beat around the bush. "What's this about Anna being terminated?" The smile on Michelle's lips faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a flicker, so fast that the old me would have missed it. But that morning, every minute movement on her face was crystal clear to me. "Oh, that." Michelle sighed softly, her voice still gentle. "I was going to tell. Thank you later. You've been traveling so much. I didn't want to bother you with small matters." "Small matters?" I repeated the words, so slowly that even I could hear the iciness in my own voice. Michelle lowered her gaze slightly. "I mean, from a corporate standpoint, it was just a personnel decision. Anna made a mistake in the reception protocol for our Japanese partners. Admin confirmed the error was hers. If I let it slide, it would be difficult to manage the staff later. I want to see all the related documents," I said, looking at her. "The original, files, emails, hotel bookings, the final approver, and any meeting minutes." Michelle paused for a few seconds. "You don't trust me?" "The company doesn't run on personal trust." The moment those words left my mouth, I saw her face pale. This was probably the first time I had used my own cold principles against her. In the past, out of respect for our family's relationship, because she was a competent worker, and because my mother adored her, I had always given Michelle a certain amount of leeway. But professional leeway and letting her touch my wife were two entirely different things. Michelle bit her lip, a look of hurt appearing artfully on her face. "Alex, I did it for you, for your mother, for our family. Anna was never a good fit for this environment. She was here for 3 years but showed no improvement, never integrated, and she made people talk. Your mother even said that if she couldn't handle the work, it might be better for her to stay home and take care of the work. Family." I froze, so my mother knew. Not only did she know, she had likely paved the way for this. I looked at Michelle, my voice dropping. "You can call my wife Anna, that's fine. But don't forget she is my legal wife. No matter what you or my mother, I think, no one has the right to use this company's name to humiliate her." Michelle's face turned ashen. "That's a harsh thing to say. I never humiliated. Here. Then prove it with the documents." Michelle couldn't say another word. When she left my office, the scent of her perfume lingered for a long time, sweet but sharp. I sat down and called Anna. The phone rang until it went to voicemail. I called. A second time, then a third. Same result. I sent a text. "Where are you?" The screen remained silent. For the first time in 3 years, Anna's silence wasn't a source of comfort but a wall I didn't know how to break through. By noon, Peter brought me a thick file. It contained Anna's termination notice, signed by Michelle, a confirmation from HR, and a report stating that Anna had unilaterally changed the hotel for the delegation, creating a risk to the Rostas Corporation's image. I examined every page, and the more I looked, the more absurd it seemed. The handwritten edits on the protocol document looked vaguely like Anna's writing but were stiff and forced. The hotel booking had been changed from a shared departmental account, not her personal one. "What did the admin staff say?" I asked Peter. He hesitated. "Sir, no one dares to speak plainly, but one of the women in the department said that Anna was in Miss Vance's office for almost an hour that day. When she came out, she was very calm, not at all like someone who had just argued over a work mistake. After that, HR processed everything very quickly, faster than normal procedure. And Anna? She didn't explain anything, just packed her things and left." I put the file down. I was beginning to understand that what bothered me wasn't just the possibility that Michelle had fabricated this. What made my chest feel heavy was that Anna hadn't come to me. She would rather pack her things and leave under the curious stares of her colleagues, rather disappear from the company for 3 weeks than make a single phone call to me. Was it because she was too submissive, or because in her heart, I was never someone who would stand on her side? That evening, I canceled 2 meetings and drove myself to our penthouse in Tribeca. It was over 5,000 square feet, overlooking the Hudson, with interiors designed by the best in the business. I had always thought it was a good enough home for Anna. A large living room, an open kitchen, a walk-in closet, a guest bedroom, a private study. But when I opened the door and stepped inside, I realized for the first time that the apartment was so cold it felt more like a luxury hotel than a home. Anna's things were still there, but so few they were almost pitiful. A pair of slippers placed neatly by the door, a light gray towel hanging in the bathroom, a few simple outfits in the dresser, with none of the usual mess of a person who truly lived there. She had been with me for 3 years, yet this home held no trace of her presence. I opened the drawer of Anna's nightstand. The old wooden box was still tucked in, on the corner. This time, I didn't put it back like I had 3 years ago. I opened it. Inside, besides the old photo of the man in front of the house in Savannah, were a few yellowed letters, an old train ticket, a tarnished silver baby, bracelet, and a scrap of paper with a date written on it. I didn't understand it. All, but the words on the back of the photo made me stand still for a long time. One day, you must know who you are. The man in the photo was in his early 30s, tall, with deep-set eyes and the face that shared some features with Anna, especially the bridge of his nose and his sad eyes. I suddenly recalled that in the pre-nuptial background check my mother had commissioned, the section on Anna's parents was brief. Father, deceased early. Mother passed away not long after. Raised by maternal grandmother. No further details. At the time, I hadn't thought it was important. Now I realize that things that are written too briefly are often deliberately shortened. That night, I went to my parents' house. My mother, Eleanor, was sitting in the living room, a cup of hot tea in her hands. She was, as always, elegant and composed, her gaze severe. Seeing me, she didn't ask what I wanted to eat or if I was tired. She went straight to the point. You know about Anna. I stood before her. How long have you known? She set her cup down. Michelle told me. I don't think her handling of it was wrong. Anna isn't suited for the company, and she's certainly not suited to be a daughter-in-law of this family. I've been patient for 3 years. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, and for the first time, the distance between us felt immense. Patient with what? What did she do wrong? Her biggest mistake is that she doesn't belong in your world, my mother's. Voice was cold and clear. Alex, you can pity someone, you can marry out of impulse, but you can't let a mistaken marriage drag on forever. Michelle is sensible. Her family is a good match, and she can help you. What does Anna have? Besides silence? I clenched my fists. You had her investigated, didn't you? My mother's gaze faltered. What are you asking? Who is the man in her old photograph? The atmosphere in the living room suddenly thickened. My father, David, was coming down the stairs at that exact moment. He heard my question, froze for a second, then glanced at my mother. The look was fleeting, but it was enough for me to know he knew something. My mother turned away. Don't dig up things that are irrelevant. I let out a soft laugh. Irrelevant? If it's so irrelevant, why did you have to hide it? My father walked over slowly, his voice low. Alex, Anna's story isn't as simple as you think. Years ago, the Hayes family in Savannah had a history with our family. The man in that photo might be Anna's biological father, but it's a story that's best left in the past. I stood frozen. The Hayes family in Savannah. Anna's biological father. A history with my family. I suddenly remembered Anna's calm face as she left the office. The old wooden box. Her grandmother's words. A deep sense of unease rose within me. It turned out that our 3-year marriage wasn't just about the coldness between us. Behind it lay a piece of the past that the adults in my family had deliberately buried, a past that perhaps Anna, in her own quiet way, was also trying to uncover. That night, before I left my parents' house, I received my first text from Anna. After all my missed calls, I'm at my grandmother's house. If you want to talk, come alone tomorrow. I stared at the words for a long time. For the first time, Anna wasn't avoiding me. But for the first time, I felt that the one about to be questioned wasn't her, but me. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I woke up earlier than usual, but not to prepare for a meeting or a business trip. I stood by the window for a long time, watching the traffic begin to swell on the streets below, my heart heavy. Anna's text from last night was still there, concise, without a word of blame or a hint of softness. Just a clear, definitive invitation. Come alone tomorrow. The last 2 words felt like a boundary line. No Michelle, no my mother, no one else, just her and me. I drove out of the city before the sun was high. The road led towards the suburbs, curving along a river before winding through an old residential area. It was a world away from the modern, high-tech urban landscape I was used to. The houses were low, with old shingled roofs and walls faded by time. I found the address Anna had sent and stopped in front of a small house tucked away on a quiet street. The iron gate had been repainted many times, but the paint was still peeling in places. I got out of the car, stood before the gate for a bland moment, and then raised my hand to knock lightly. The sound echoed in the morning stillness. A moment later, the door opened. It was Anna. She was wearing a simple outfit, her hair tied back, her face free of makeup. It was the same familiar face, but something was different. The quiet submissiveness was gone, replaced by a gaze that was calmer, deeper, as if she had been through something I knew nothing about. Anna looked at me for a second, then opened the gate wider. "Come in." Her voice was soft, neither cold nor warm, so normal that I didn't know how to react. I stepped into a small yard with a few potted plants and an old wooden bench, under a magnolia tree. The space was simple but tidy, with the faint scent of tea in the air. "Have a seat." Anna gestured to the bench and went inside. I sat down and looked around. This was where Anna had lived before she entered my life. A place that, for 3 years, I had never once asked about, nor had any intention of learning about. A little while later, Anna came out with 2 cups of tea. She placed one in front of me and sat across from me. The distance between us was just a small table, but it felt farther than ever before. I spoke first. "I called you several times. Why didn't you answer?" Anna looked down at her cup, turning it gently in her hands. "I didn't think it was necessary." "Not necessary?" I repeated, my voice heavy. "You quit your job, you left our home, you disappeared for 3 weeks, and none of that required a single word." "To me?" Anna looked up, her gaze direct and calm. "For 3 years, Alex, has it ever made a difference whether I spoke or not?" That question silenced me. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew the answer wouldn't be in my favor. Anna continued, her voice even. "The day you brought me to the company, you told, 'Hear me.' It was a chance for me to stand on my own 2 feet. I believed you. I worked hard. I didn't rely on you. I didn't ask anyone for help. I thought if I just did my job well, everything would be fine." She paused, then smiled faintly. But I was wrong. I clenched my hand slightly. "I'm investigating what happened at the company. If something isn't right, I don't need you to." Anna cut me off, her voice soft but firm. "I don't need you to get justice for me." I looked at her. "Then what do you need?" Anna was silent for a few seconds. Then she set down her cup and looked straight. "Oh, at me. I need to know where you stand in all of this." I paused. "What do you mean? Do you know who was behind my termination?" The question was like a needle, pricking the very spot I was trying to avoid. I didn't answer immediately. Anna didn't wait. "It was Michelle. And your mother." I took a deep breath. "I'm reviewing the files. There are inconsistencies. I'll get to the bottom of it." "I'm not asking what you're going to do." Anna shook her head, her voice still calm. "I'm asking where you stand." I looked at her, and for the first time, that question felt more difficult than any business decision I had ever made. "I stand on the side of the truth." I said slowly. "I don't accept anyone using the company to settle personal scores." Anna nodded slightly. "And what about me?" I was silent. I couldn't answer that question right away. Anna watched me for a moment, then sighed softly. "I understand." The way she said it made my heart sink. What do you understand? You don't stand with me. You stand with your principles. I wanted to argue, but the words caught in my throat. Because on some level she was right. Anna turned her face away, looking out at the small yard. Let's not talk about that anymore. I'm sure you didn't come here just because of the company. I remembered my father's words from last night. Alex, Anna's story isn't as simple as you think. I looked at Anna. I want to ask about your family. She didn't turn back immediately. What is there to ask about my family? Who is the man in the photo in the wooden box? The space around us seemed to go still. A light breeze rustled the magnolia leaves. Anna remained motionless, but I could see her shoulders tense slightly. After a moment, she turned back. You opened the box. Yes. Anna looked at me for a long time, not with anger or blame, but with a gaze so deep I couldn't guess what she was thinking. That's my father, she said, slowly. He passed away when I was little. My mother died soon after. I've lived with my grandmother ever since. The Hayes family in Savannah, I continued, my voice low. Anna's brow furrowed slightly. Who told you that? My father. Anna gave a humorless laugh. So you finally know. I looked at her, my heart slowing. What happened between your family and mine? Anna was silent. This time her silence wasn't calm. It carried a much heavier emotion. Do you really want to know? Yes. Anna reached under the table and brought out another wooden box, smaller and older. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward me. I've kept these things for years. I never intended to show them to anyone. But since you're asking, you should see for yourself. I opened the box. Inside was a bundle of old papers tied with a thin string. I untied it and opened them. They were photocopies of documents, a few letters, and a yellowed newspaper clipping. The first headline made me freeze. Serious. Industrial accident at Reed construction site. I read quickly. A man named William Hayes, a site engineer, died in a scaffolding collapse. The article noted signs of safety violations, but the incident was later ruled an unforeseen accident. I looked up at Anna. This was your father. Her voice was very quiet, but clear. I felt my throat go dry. But the matter was settled according to regulations. Anna looked at me, her gaze no longer calm. You know better than I do how it was settled, don't you? I couldn't answer. She continued, her voice steady but each word heavier than the last. After that, my family received a settlement. The file says it was adequate. But some things aren't in the files. My grandmother's formal complaints, the times she came to the city, stood outside the company headquarters, and was never allowed to see anyone. Anna paused and looked straight at me. Do you think it was a coincidence that I started working at your company? I was speechless. I knew from the beginning, she went on. I knew you were the son of the Fox company's owner. I knew this was the place where my father worked and died. I didn't go there for revenge. I just wanted to know the truth. I looked at Anna, feeling as if the world around me was shifting. So, for the past 3 years, she had lived as an ordinary employee, never mentioning the past. I never thought I'd have to face it like this, Anna said with a sad smile. But I guess some things can't stay hidden forever. I clutched the papers in my hand. For the first time, I felt I was not just a husband who had been indifferent to his wife, but also potentially a part of a past she had carried for so many years. And if what Anna said was true, then the ones who needed to answer weren't just me, but my parents as well. I looked at her, my voice low. What do you want me to do? Anna shook her head. I'm not asking for anything. She stood up and looked down at me. But from today on, I'm not going back to the way things were. And you can't keep living as if you never knew. I sat there in that small yard, amidst the old papers and a truth that had just been laid bare. For the first time, I understood that the story between me and Anna wasn't just about two people. It was about a debt I wasn't sure I had the right to repay. I sat in that small yard for a long time, my hand still holding the yellowed papers, my mind pulled back to a time I had never witnessed. The midday sun slanted through the magnolia leaves, casting dappled light on the table, on the pages that recorded a death I had only known through a few brief lines in an ingenue. Internal company report. Anna stood a few feet away, saying nothing more. She wasn't pressuring me, not demanding anything, just leaving me to face what I had just read. Her silence now was no longer one of endurance, but of someone who had waited long enough to know that some answers had to be found by the person facing the question. I folded the papers, placed them back in the box, and pushed it gently toward Anna. I need time to verify this, I said, my voice low, lacking its usual certainty. Anna nodded slightly. I'm not in a hurry. She said it, but I understood her not in a hurry wasn't about waiting, but about letting go. Letting go of any reliance on me as someone who could change things. I stood up. Before walking to the gate, I turned back to her. Anna, she looked at me. If this isn't what you think it is, you don't have to say anything in advance, Anna interrupted, her voice still, soft. Just, when you find out, tell me the truth, that's all. I said no more. I opened the gate and stepped out. The street was as quiet as when I arrived, but my mind was no longer at peace. On the drive back to the Blakesurys' city, I didn't turn on the music or answer my phone. The images replayed in my head. The headline on the old newspaper, the face of the man in the photo, the look in Anna's eyes when she said, "That's my father." I remembered what I knew. Reed Construction had dozens of major projects. Years ago, when my father was still in charge, safety oversight wasn't always as strict as it is now, but all major incidents had been handled according to an procedure, with complete records. I had believed that for years. Now, that belief was starting to crack. I went straight to the office. Peter stood up the moment I walked in. "Mr. Reed, the meeting with the Korean partners is this afternoon." "Cancel it," I said curtly. "Get me the complete files for all projects from 15 years ago, especially the one in Savannah where the accident occurred. The original documents, not the summaries." Peter paused. "Sir, for files that old, I'll need Mr. David's authorization. I'll talk to my father. Just get them ready." Peter nodded, asking no more questions. I went into my office and closed the door. Alone in the familiar space, I felt like a stranger. The large desk, the awards on the wall, all the things that once gave me confidence now couldn't help me answer the simplest question. If there truly was a cover-up, what would I do? The phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Where are you?" Her voice was calm but laced with urgency. "At the office. Come home this evening. We need to talk." "Wasn't last night enough?" I shot back. The other end went silent for a beat. "Regarding Anna, I don't want you to go. Too far." I leaned back in my chair. "How far is too far?" "Far enough to dig up things that should stay buried." Her voice hardened. "Alex, some things are in the past. The more you search, the worse it will be. For everyone." I looked out the window at the bustling city. "Worse for everyone, or worse for our family?" My mother didn't answer immediately. "You're the successor. You have to know what to protect and what to let go." "And which category does the truth fall into?" I asked pointedly. A longer silence on the other end. "You're still young. You don't understand." "Maybe," I said slowly. "But I know one thing. The less I understand, the more I have to find out." I hung up before she could say more. That afternoon, I got a call from my father. "Alex, come down to my office." His voice was deep, not harsh, but commanding. I went downstairs to his office. I'd been in this room countless times since I was a child, but never with a feeling like this. My father sat behind his desk, a stack of files open before him. "Sit." I pulled up a chair. He pushed the files toward me. "This is the complete record of the accident from that year. Read it." I opened it. The documents were far more detailed than Anna's old newspaper. Clipping, site reports, technical assessments, the official conclusion from the police authorities, confirmation of compensation. Everything was presented logically and cohesively, with no obvious signs of error. I turned each page, searching for an anomaly, but the more I read, the more it looked like an accident that had been properly handled. I looked up. Then what was Anna's grandmother complaining about? My father met my gaze without flinching. She claimed there were safety violations, but the authorities concluded there were none. As for us, we provided additional support beyond what was required. He paused. Alex, I won't deny that the company had its shortcomings back then, but not every accident is our fault. Construction sites always carry risks. I was silent. Anna, I pressed on. When did you know she was his daughter? My father looked straight at me. The moment you said you wanted to marry her. I clenched my fists. And you said nothing. I told your mother, he replied calmly. I thought it was in the past. I didn't see the need to drag you into it. I let out a bitter laugh. But I was dragged into it anyway. My father said nothing more. The room fell quiet. I closed the file. I'm going to launch an independent investigation, I said. Not just based on our records. My father nodded slightly. That's your right. He looked at me, his voice growing deeper. But be prepared. No matter the outcome, people will get hurt. I stood up. Someone was already hurt 15 years ago. I turned and walked to the door. As I left the office, I saw Michelle standing in the hallway. She seemed to have been waiting. Alex, I stopped. I hear you're reviewing old files, she said softly, her eyes betraying her anxiety. Yes. Is that really necessary? I looked at her. What do you think? Michelle was quiet for a moment, then stepped closer. I'm just worried you'll complicate everything because of Anna. The family, the company, everything is stable. Stable based on what? I asked. On no one asking any more questions? Michelle bit her lip. You've changed. Or maybe, I countered, I'm just starting to see things clearly. I walked away. That evening, I returned to the penthouse in Tribeca. The space was still quiet, but it no longer felt empty. On the table, Anna's wooden box still sat. I opened it again and looked at the photo of the man I had never met. One day, you must know who you are. The words were meant for Anna, but now they felt as though they were meant for me too. I sat down and texted Anna. I will find the truth, not just for you. A moment later, she replied, You don't have to do it for me. I looked at her words and put my phone down. Maybe Anna didn't need me to, but I did. Because for the first time, I realized that if I didn't face this past, I would never know where I truly stood in my own life. The next morning, I started with something I rarely did myself, digging through the company's old data archives without going through the legal department or my assistant. I had Peter grant me access to the digital repository, which held scans of records from over a decade ago. Everything was meticulously organized, as expected of a major corporation. But the more organized it was, the colder it felt. I found the Savannah project from the year of the accident. The files were as complete as my father had shown me, not a single document missing. But this time, I wasn't reading as a manager. I was reading as someone searching for a crack, a small detail that might have been overlooked. And I found one. The person responsible for safety supervision that day was not William Hayes, Anna's father. He was just the site engineer. The person who signed off on the final safety confirmation was someone else. Michael Kane. I paused. I'd seen that name somewhere. I called Peter in. Look up a Michael Kane for me. He worked for us about 15 years ago. Peter nodded and quickly left. Less than 20 minutes later, he returned. Mr. Reed, this man was the head of site supervision for the southern region. He resigned after that accident. His current whereabouts are unknown. Unknown? Yes, sir. His resignation file cites personal reasons. No updated contact information. I was silent. Do you have an old address? Yes. In Savannah. I nodded. Book me the earliest flight. Peter looked surprised. Are you going alone, sir? Yes. I offered no further explanation. That afternoon, I was in Savannah. The city was more peaceful than New York, its pace slower, less clamorous. But my mind was racing. I went straight to Michael Kane's old address. It was a single-story house on a small street, a bougainvillea vine withering on the porch. I knocked. A middle-aged woman opened the door, her eyes wary. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am, I'm looking for Mr. Michael Caine. Is he here?" A heavy silence fell. The woman looked me up and down. "Who are you?" "I'm an old acquaintance of his." "He's gone," she said, her voice flat. "Passed away 4 years ago." She started to close the door, but then paused. "What did you want with him?" "I wanted to ask about an accident at a construction site at Reed. Construction." The name made her freeze. She stared at me for a long moment. "So, you're one of to them." "I knew someone would come looking one day." She opened the door a little wider. "Come in." I stepped inside. The house was modest and quiet. She gestured for me to sit, then disappeared into another room, returning with a dusty envelope. She placed it on the table in front of me. "This is what he left behind." He said if anyone ever came asking about that time, I was to give them this. I picked up the envelope. It was unsealed, the paper brittle with age. "What did he tell you?" I asked. "Not much," she said. "Just that he owed a man an apology he could never give." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the script unsteady. I began to read. "To whomever from Reed Construction finds this, if it is one of David Reed's descendants, then know that I have been silent for 15 years. Not because I was innocent." I paused, my heart pounding, then continued reading. On the day of the accident, the scaffolding had shown signs of being unsafe. William Hayes had reported it multiple times, but the project was on a tight deadline. I signed off on the safety report to keep us on schedule. That was my mistake. After the accident, the company handled it in a way that minimized their liability. The victim's family was compensated, but the true cause was, I never made public. I took money to stay quiet and leave the company. The handwriting at the end was shakier. I know I was at fault. I have lived with that for many years. If anyone is still searching for the truth, please tell them that William Hayes was not to blame. I finished reading, my hand still holding the paper, my mind blank. The woman looked at me. "You understand now, don't you?" I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "After he quit, he lived a quiet life," she said, her voice low. "He rarely spoke of the past. It wasn't until near the end that he wrote that letter. He said some mistakes can't be fixed. You can only wait for someone with enough courage to face them." I stood up and bowed my head slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." I left the house as dusk was setting. The Savannah sun was gentler, but my heart was heavier than ever. It was all clear now. No more doubts, no more vague feelings. The truth was in my hands. Anna's father was not at fault, and my family's company had, one way or another, let him take the blame. That night, alone in my hotel room, I read the letter again. Each word felt etched into my mind. I thought of Anna, of her grandmother, of the times she had stood outside the company headquarters and been turned away. I called my father. He answered after a few rings. "Alex, you're in Savannah." A beat of silence on the other end. "Who did you meet?" "Michael Caine, but he's passed away. I met his wife. She gave me a letter." I spoke slowly. "It says that Anna's father reported the safety risks, but because of the deadline, the supervisor signed off anyway. After the accident, everything was handled to minimize liability." The line went quiet. "Did you know about this?" I asked. After a long moment, my father's voice came through, deeper than usual. I heard a preliminary report, but not those details. "Do you believe it? If the document you have is real, then I have to believe it." I closed my eyes. So what should I do now? The question was no longer a son asking his father, but a man at a crossroads asking his own conscience. My father sighed. "Alex, if you bring this to light, it won't just affect one person. The company's reputation, so many people, so many families. What about Anna's family?" I cut in. Silence. "Dad," I said slowly, each word clear. "To us, it might have been one incident among dozens of projects, but to them, it was a life." I paused. Can't pretend I don't know. I hung up before I could hear anything else. I didn't sleep that night. I sat, staring at the letter until dawn. For the first time, I understood what Anna meant when she said she had lived as an ordinary employee for 3 years. She had carried all of this with her, right inside my company, watching everything operate as if nothing had ever happened. The next morning, I flew back to New York. The first thing I did was go straight to Anna's house. The quiet street was the same as before. I knocked. Anna opened the door, her eyes unsurprised. "You're back." She said it as if she knew it would return. I looked at her and held out the envelope. I found the answer. Anna looked at the envelope in my hand, then up at me. "So, what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to make the truth public, whatever the 5 consequences." Anna was silent for a moment, her calm gaze wavering slightly. "Are you sure?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I know if I don't, I won't be myself anymore." Anna looked at me for a long time, then gave a slight nod. It wasn't agreement, but acceptance that the path ahead could not be reversed. And I understood that from this moment on, everything between me and her, between my family and the past, would enter a new phase. A phase where no one could pretend they didn't know. I left Anna's house as the sun climbed higher, but I felt like I had just walked through a storm that hadn't yet cleared. The drive back to the office wasn't long, but every block felt heavier than usual. I knew that the moment I told Anna I would publicize the truth, it was no longer a private matter between 2 private people. It involved an entire corporation, my family, and the people who had been left behind for 15 years. When I stepped into my office, Peter was already waiting. He looked at me with a tolerating hint of worry. "Mr. Reed, your mother called the office twice this morning. She said she needs to see you immediately." I nodded slightly. "I know. And Miss Vance is waiting in the conference room." I paused. "What is she doing here?" "I'm not sure, sir. But it seems the news that you're reviewing old files has spread." I wasn't surprised. In a corporation this large, any move by the CEO is watched. "Schedule an emergency meeting with the senior leadership team." "Everyone." Peter looked at me as if to confirm. "Are you sure, sir?" I looked straight at him. "I'm sure." Peter didn't ask again. He turned to make the arrangements. I sat down, placing the envelope containing Michael Caine's letter on the desk. I stared at it for a long moment. An old piece of paper, a few trembling lines of text, yet it held the power to shake the very foundations of what I thought was solid. The door opened without a knock. My mother, Eleanor, walked in. She had her usual poise, but her eyes were no longer calm. Behind her, Michelle stood a step back, silent but clearly monitoring my every reaction. "I told you not to go too far," my mother said, wasting no time. I stood up. "I already have." She glanced at the envelope on the desk. "What is that?" "The truth," I answered curtly. Michelle stepped forward, her voice soft but laced with tension. "Alex, I think we should all calm down. This happened a long time ago. The legal paperwork is all finalized. If you bring this up now, it won't just affect the company, but what?" I looked straight at her. Michelle faltered. "But the honor of your family," she said quietly. I gave a humorless laugh. "Honor built on what, Michelle? Do you know?" She was silent. "On concealment or on confrontation?" I pressed. No one answered. My mother stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "Alex, you are the successor. You do not have the right to act on emotion." "I am not acting on emotion," I said slowly. "I am acting because I know exactly what happened." She stared at me for a long moment, then spoke each word distinctly. "You're choosing to side with an outsider against your own family." The words hung in the air, chilling the room. I looked at my mother for the Bejan's Tardan. First time not backing down. "She is not an outsider." My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "She is my wife." My mother let out a faint, joyless laugh. "A wife? A woman who hid her past and entered this family with unclear motives. You call that a wife?" I clenched my fists. "She didn't hide it. Our family didn't want to know. Michelle spoke up, her voice softer. Alex, I don't deny that the company might have had oversights back then. But the conditions, the regulations, everything was different. If you make this public now, are you sure you're helping the right people? Or are you just making things worse? I looked at Michelle. Who are you worried about? She hesitated for a second, then answered, I'm worried about you. I said nothing more. I knew that answer was only a small fraction of the truth. I picked up the envelope. This afternoon I will meet with the leadership team. All files will be presented. My mother stepped forward, her hand on the desk, her voice firm. I do not approve. I looked at her. This isn't about your approval, this is about what's right. And you think you can bear the consequences? She challenged. I didn't answer right away. I knew the consequences would be immense. The stock could plummet. Partners could withdraw. A reputation built over decades could be shattered in days. But some things, if left undone, carry an even greater price. I don't know, I said honestly. But I know if I stay silent, I will no longer to have the right to stand in this position. My mother withdrew her hand, looking at me as if I were a stranger. You've changed. I shook my head slightly. Maybe I've just begun to understand. The room fell silent. Michelle looked from me to my mother, as if wanting to say something but held back. Finally, my mother turned to leave. Do what you want. But remember, from this moment on, you are responsible for your own actions. The door closed behind her and Michelle. I stood still for a moment, then sat down. The feeling in my chest wasn't victory or defeat, but a quiet emptiness, as if I had just severed an invisible tie to my family. That afternoon, the top-floor conference room was full. The familiar faces of the leadership team were all present. The atmosphere was different from a typical meeting. No one spoke. They just waited for me to begin. I stood at the head of the table. We're meeting today to review an incident that occurred 15 years ago, I said slowly, enunciating each word. At a construction project in Savannah. A few people exchanged glances. Some frowned. Others remained impassive. I placed the envelope on the table, opened it, and laid the letter in the center. This document is from a direct party involved. Its contents indicate that there in Fluid Entheder were critical safety failures that led to the accident. One of the directors spoke up. Alex, this matter was officially closed long ago. I'm aware, I cut in, my voice steady. But that conclusion was incomplete. The room fell silent. I am commissioning a full internal audit and an independent third-party investigation. All findings will be made public. Another person asked, and what is the proposed course of action? I looked around the table. If it is confirmed that the company was at fault, we will issue a public apology and provide new compensation to the victim's family. The atmosphere grew heavy. Alex, the repercussions of this will be enormous. I will take full responsibility for those repercussions, I said. No one said anything more. They may not have agreed, but they couldn't object. Directly. They understood this was a decision I had made, not a proposal up for debate. The meeting ended in silence. As everyone filed out, I remained alone in the fragments room, looking out the glass wall at the city, moving on as usual. No one knew that up here, a decision had just been made that could change everything. That evening, I texted Anna. It has begun. A moment later, she replied, I know. I looked at the words, then typed another line. Whatever the outcome, I will tell you. Anna didn't reply right away. After a long moment, a new message appeared. This time, I believe you. I read that sentence twice. In 3 years, I never thought I would see Anna say that to me. Not because I had done something grand, but simply because this time, I hadn't turned away. And perhaps that was the first step in repaying the debt I had just come to understand. The days that followed were anything but normal. The company continued to operate, departments worked, projects ran, but underneath it all was an undercurrent that everyone could feel. The news of my review of old files spread faster than I expected. It didn't need a public announcement. One unscheduled meeting and a few hushed conversations were enough for the entire building to. I know something big was happening. Peter was in my office more often than usual. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, but his eyes couldn't hide his anxiety. "Mr. Reed, the internal audit team has started. They've requested access to more original documents in the breeded physical archive. Grant them full access," I said curtly. "And the independent firm will begin tomorrow." I nodded. Everything was moving in the direction I had chosen, but the further I went, the clearer the cost of that choice became. By midday, the market began to react. Our stock price dipped slightly, not a crash, but enough to get the finance department's attention. A few partners called to inquire about the situation, their questions vague but their purpose clear. I gave them all the same answer. "We are conducting an internal review. We will make a formal announcement once we have conclusive findings." No evasion, but no further explanation. That afternoon, Michelle walked into my office without knocking. "You are pushing things too far." Her voice was no longer soft. It was sharp, urgent, even angry. I didn't look up from my screen immediately. "Are you talking about the company? Or something personal?" "Both." Michelle strode to my desk and placed her hands on it, looking straight down at me. "Do you have any idea how many calls I've received since this morning? Partners, shareholders, even my own family. Everyone is asking about this." I looked up. "And what did you tell them?" "I didn't know what to tell them," she said bluntly. "Because I don't understand why you're doing this." I stared at Michelle for a few seconds. "You really don't understand? Since when did you have the authority to make personnel decisions about my wife?" The question made her freeze. I followed protocol. "What protocol allows you to terminate someone without informing me?" "She was just an employee." "She is my wife," I cut in, my voice quiet but firm. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Michelle took a step back, a flash of 22, resentment in her eyes. "You're letting your personal feelings interfere with business." "And you?" I countered. "You're not letting your feelings interfere?" Michelle didn't answer right away. She turned away for a moment, then looked back. "Do you think I did all of this for myself?" Her voice dropped, becoming slower. "I did it for you, for your future." I shook my head. "You did it for yourself." That statement made Michelle stiffen. A few seconds passed. Then, suddenly, she laughed, but it was no longer a gentle sound. "You really have changed." "I haven't changed," I said. "I just stopped looking away." Michelle stared at me for a long moment, then turned to leave. "You'll regret this," she said before walking out the door. I didn't stop her. The door closed, leaving a familiar silence. But this time, the silence didn't bother me. It felt like a necessary space for me to see everything clearly. That night, I didn't go back to the penthouse. I drove to my parents' house. The lights were on. When I walked in, my mother was sitting in the living room. My father sat across from her. They weren't talking. Only the low murmur of the television filled the space. My mother looked at me. "You're here." Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were not. I walked in and sat down. "I need to talk to you both." My father turned off the TV. "Go on." I placed a copy of Michael Caine's letter on the table. "I met with someone involved. This is their testimony." My mother didn't pick it up. She looked at the paper as if it were something she didn't want to touch. "What more do you want?" she asked. "I want to know who made the final decision on how to handle the incident." My father looked at me, his gaze unflinching. "I did." One word. But it landed. With incredible weight. The room seemed to freeze. I nodded slowly. "For the sake of the project's timeline." My father sighed. "For many reasons," he said slowly. "At the time, the company needed to maintain its reputation with a major partner. An incident like that, if it was blown out of proportion, would have caused significant damage. So you knew there was a problem, but you still chose that course of action," I pressed. My father was silent for a few seconds. "I knew there were oversights, but I didn't think it would lead to such a consequence." I clenched my fists. "A man died," I said, my voice low, "and his family carried that with them for 15 years. My mother spoke up, her voice sharp. "So, what do you want? To go back in time? The dead won't come back to life, and the company can't afford another scandal. Like this. I looked at my mother. It's not about bringing them back to life, I said, slowly. It's about not continuing to live as if nothing happened. My mother gave a bitter laugh. Maybe, I conceded. But without them, I don't know what I'd have left to hold. Honte. The room fell silent. My father looked down at the table, saying nothing more. My mother turned her face away, clearly disagreeing but not arguing further. I stood up. My decision is made, I said. I didn't come here for permission. I turned to leave. As I reached the door, my father's voice called out from behind me. Alex. I stopped. If you do this, I won't stop you, he said, but be prepared to lose a lot. I didn't turn back. I know. I walked outside. That night, I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly through the city, eventually stopping at a small coffee shop. Sitting alone, I replayed everything that had happened. Marrying Anna, the silent dinners, the times she waited up for me, the questions I never asked. For 3 years, I had never truly seen her. Only when everything fell apart did I begin to understand. I took out my phone and called Anna. She answered after a few rings. Alex? Her voice was soft. What are you doing? I'm at home. Can I come over tonight? There was a slight pause on the other end. Okay, just one word, but it was enough. I stood up, paid, and drove. The road to Anna's house no longer felt unfamiliar. When I knocked, she opened the door immediately, as if she had been expecting me. I walked in and didn't speak right away. We sat at the small, familiar table. After a moment, I spoke. I talked to my father. Anna looked at me. What did he say? He admitted it, I said. Anna's gaze flickered. Then that's enough, she said, her voice very quiet. No, I shook my head. I'm going to see this through to the end. Anna looked at me for a long time, then sighed softly. You know, she said, I don't need your company to apologize. I just needed to know my father wasn't at fault. I nodded. So do I. A silence settled between us, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like a pause between two people who were beginning to understand each other. And I knew the road ahead was still long, but at least I was no longer standing still. I didn't leave right away that night. I stayed at Anna's longer than usual, not because there was more to say, but because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to rush away. Anna made tea, her movements in the small kitchen slow and familiar. I sat and watched her, suddenly realizing how many simple moments like this I had missed. She placed 2 cups on the table. When are you planning to make the announcement? Anna asked. No specific date yet, but soon, I replied. After I get the official findings from the audit and the independent firm, I'll hold a press conference. Anna nodded, asking no more. She wasn't the type to pry into someone's plans, especially once she understood their choice. Have you thought about the consequences? She asked, her voice still gentle. I have, and I'm still doing it. Why are you asking? I looked at her. Anna paused for a moment. Because I don't want you to do this for me. Her words made me stop. I'm not doing it for you, I said slowly. I'm doing it for me. Anna looked at me, her gaze deeper now. Then I'm not worried, she said softly. That answer didn't bring an emotional outburst, but it made me feel a bit lighter. At least this decision wasn't about atonement or redemption for one person. It was something I had to do if I wanted to stand firm in my own life. I left Anna's house late. The city was quieter, but my mind was no longer in turmoil. The next morning, the board meeting was held earlier than expected. I walked into the room to find everyone already present, the tension palpable. No one needed to say it. I knew they had all heard something. My uncle, Howard, my father's younger brother, was the first to speak. Alex. How far has this gone? His tone wasn't aggressive, but it was clearly displeased. I am having all old project files reviewed, especially incidents related to workplace safety, I answered. And some serious issues have been confirmed. A few people in the room exchanged glances. Uncle Howard leaned back in his paried chair. What are you planning to do? I was direct. Publicize the truth. The atmosphere in the room immediately dropped. Another board member spoke up. Do you understand how that will affect the company? I do. The stock will drop. Partners may withdraw. A reputation built over decades could be lost in days. I know, I said. But if we don't do this, on what foundation are we protecting that reputation? My question silenced them. Uncle Howard frowned. Sometimes, not everything, needs to be said. I disagree. I looked straight at him. Some things, if left unsaid, will never end. Someone else interjected. But this was over a decade ago. Bringing it up now will only make things worse. Worse for whom? I asked. No one answered. I continued. For the company or for those who were involved? The tension in the room grew. Uncle Howard sighed. You're being too rigid. Maybe, I conceded. But if I'm not rigid this time, there won't be another chance. A long silence followed. Finally, an older member spoke up. Alex. His voice was deep and slow. I don't oppose clarifying the truth, but you must have a plan to mitigate the damage. I have one, I said. We will proactively make the announcement, not let outsiders exploit it. At the same time, the company will establish a fund to support victims' families, overhaul our entire safety protocol, and publicly reform. It's the only way to regain trust. I paused, then added, not by hiding, but by taking responsibility. That statement quieted the room. Not everyone agreed, but at least no one objected directly anymore. The meeting ended without a formal vote, but I knew I had crossed a line. Walking out of the room, I saw Peter waiting. How did it go, sir? No one fully agrees, I said, but no one is stopping me either. Peter let out a breath. That's a start. I nodded. Get ready. We don't have much time. The following days passed in a blur. Documents were finalized, reports compiled, every detail checked and rechecked. One afternoon, as I was in my office, Peter came in. Mr. Reed, someone is here to see you. Who? Michael Caine. I froze. He says it's important. I nodded. Let him in. I realized he meant Michael Caine's son. He walked in, looking much as his mother had described his father, but his eyes were different, no longer evasive, but as if he had made a decision. Mr. Reed. Please, sit down, I said. He sat, silent for a moment. I didn't come to talk about the past anymore, he said. I know you have enough. Then why are you here? I want to provide more evidence. I looked at him. What evidence? He took a small USB drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk. This contains an audio recording of the internal meeting from that year. The meeting, where the leadership decided how to handle the incident. My heart sank. Where did you get this? My father kept it, he said. He didn't dare do anything then, but he never deleted it. I picked up the USB drive. It felt heavier than it looked. If I release this, I know, he cut in, but if you don't, everything will always be ambiguous. Looked at me. You've come this far. See it through to the end. I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. He stood up. I don't need your thanks, he said. I just want this to be over. He left, leaving the USB on my desk. I sat alone, staring at it for a long time. An audio recording, an undeniable truth, and the one thing that could change everything. I turned on my computer and inserted the drive. Before I clicked play, I paused. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that after hearing it, there would be no turning back. I clicked. The sound filled the room. Familiar voices, including my father's. Every sentence, every word, was clear and irrefutable. I sat motionless and listened to the end. When the file finished, the room was silent again. But this silence was unlike any before. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It was enough. There was nothing left to wait for. I opened my eyes and picked up the phone to call Peter. Prepare a press conference, I said. In 2 days. A second of silence on the other end. Are you sure, sir? I'm sure. I hung up. I looked at the USB one last time. The path ahead was clear, and I would walk it to the end. 2 days later, the press conference hall was set up early. I arrived nearly an end-OC, hour ahead of schedule, not to check on things, but to have one last moment of quiet before facing everyone. The room was large, lit by stark white lights, with rows of chairs neatly arranged. On the stage was a long table with microphones already in place. It all looked so normal, like any other announcement I had ever been a part of. But I knew today would be different. Peter came in after me. "The press turnout is larger than expected," he said. "Even some national news networks are here." I nodded. "Good." Peter watched me for a moment. "Are you okay, sir?" "I'm fine," I replied curtly. It wasn't that I didn't feel the pressure, but the feeling was no longer fear. It was like being on a long road and having gone too far to even think about turning back. The only way was forward. About 15 minutes before we were set to begin, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a second, then answered, "Hello?" A few seconds of silence, then a familiar voice. "Alex, it's your Uncle Howard." I wasn't surprised, but I wasn't pleased either. "What is it, Uncle? Where are you?" "At the press conference." A pause. "I want to see you before you go out there." "That's not necessary," I said. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it now." His voice grew heavy. "Do you know what you're doing?" "I do. You're driving this whole company off a cliff. Or maybe," I countered, "I'm pulling it out of a hole it's been stuck in for too long." He sighed heavily. "You're young, you don't understand. Some things, if you dig all them up, won't just hurt the company. Our family won't be at peace either." I paused. "And how is our family at peace, Uncle?" "By pretending nothing ever happened?" "It's not pretending," Howard said quickly. "It's knowing what's best kept private." "I disagree," I said. "Some things, if kept private, are not protection. They're complicity." The line grew tense. "You're overreacting." "Maybe." I didn't deny it. "But if I don't do this, I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror later." Howard was silent for a few seconds. Then his voice slowed. "Have you thought about your father?" That question made me pause, but only for a moment. "I think about my father every day," I said. "And that's exactly why I have to do this. Your father is gone. What he needs is for his name to be protected. You should protect it." "Respect isn't about hiding things," I replied, "and honor can't be built on the silence of those who have suffered." He didn't say anything else. Finally, Howard said very softly, "You will regret this." I didn't answer. I hung up. Peter, standing nearby, looked at me. "Is everything all right, sir?" "It's nothing," I said. "Just a phone call repeating old arguments." He asked no more. At the scheduled time, the press conference began. I walked onto the stage, the lights blinding, facing dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes, cameras, phones. It was a familiar feeling, yet entirely different. I sat down and adjusted the microphone. "Good morning, everyone." My voice was steadier than I expected. "I am Alexander Reed, CEO of Sterling Reed Enterprises." I paused, not to catch my breath, but to choose my next words. "I am here today, not to announce a new project or an achievement." I looked directly at the crowd. "I am here to talk about an incident from our past." The mood in the room shifted instantly. A low murmur spread. "Many years ago, at a construction site managed by our company, a serious incident involving workplace safety occurred," I said slowly, enunciating each word. "That incident resulted in a fatality." A few people in the audience started scribbling faster. What is important is that the handling of the incident at the time was not transparent, not complete, and not in line with the responsibilities that a corporation should uphold. I could feel every eye on me. As the current leader of this company, I accept responsibility on behalf of the organization. I gave a slight bow. "Furthermore, we will be releasing all related files, including documents that have never before been made public." A reporter raised her hand. "Can you be more specific about the extent of the damages and the individuals involved?" I nodded. "Specific details will be in the official press kit after this conference, but I can say that the responsibility does not lie with a single individual, but with an entire system, Another question. There are reports that the former leadership of the company directly ordered a cover-up. Can you confirm this? I paused for a second. This was the most critical moment. I will not offer personal opinions, I said, but I will be releasing an audio recording from an internal meeting held at that time so that everyone can make their own judgment. The room erupted in a wave of commotion. Behind me, Peter stood tense. I took the USB drive and placed it on the table. This file will be distributed immediately following this conference. Another reporter asked, "Are you concerned this will affect your family's A-chains reputation?" I looked straight at him. I believe reputation is not about hiding mistakes, but about how you face them. My answer quieted the room. The conference lasted nearly an hour. I answered every question without evasion, without pretense. When it was over, I stood and bowed once more. Thank you. I stepped down from the stage, feeling as if I had just walked through a hurricane. Peter rushed over. "Are you okay, sir?" "I'm okay," I said. But in my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. The phone was buzzing incessantly. Texts, calls, notifications. I didn't open them. I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The sky was the same as any other day. Nothing had changed, except me. That evening, I sat alone in my office, watching news headlines populate my parted screen. Bold titles, clear photos, it was all spreading faster than I had imagined. Decade-long scandal uncovered. New CEO exposes truth. Shocking audio. Recording released. I read a few lines and then turned it off. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I already knew enough. A little later, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I stared at the screen, then answered, "Hello, Mom." Her voice on the other end was slow, with a slight tremor. "You did it, didn't you?" "Yes." A pause. "I'm not going to ask if it was right or wrong," she said. "But I want to know. Do you feel at peace?" I looked out the window. A simple question, but not an easy one to answer. "Yes," I said slowly. "But it's not a light feeling." My mother said nothing more, just sighed softly. "Well, then that's all that matters," she said. "As long as you don't feel you've wronged yourself." I closed my eyes. Yes, the call ended, but my mother's words lingered. I sat there, not doing anything, not thinking anything specific. For the first time in many years, I no longer felt like I was hiding from something. Outside, the city lights burned bright. Inside, a piece of the past had finally been opened. Whatever came next, I knew. I had taken a step from which there was no return. And perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I hadn't slept deeply. My phone had been buzzing all night with messages from partners, employees, and strangers. I didn't answer them right away. I needed a moment of quiet before facing it all. When I finally opened my phone, the first thing I saw was a flood of headlines, my company's name, my name, and phrases heavier than I had imagined. Scandal covered up for years. New CEO reveals truth. Shocking audio recording. I skimmed them without reading closely, not because I was afraid, but because I had prepared for this. Peter called. "Mr. Reed, can you come to the office early?" "What's wrong?" "The stock has dropped sharply. Several partners have sent notices to temporarily suspend their contracts. The employees are in a panic." I was silent for a second. "I'm on my way." When I walked into the office, the atmosphere was completely different. The way people looked at me had changed. It wasn't the usual respect, but a mixture of scrutiny, anxiety, and unspoken questions. Peter was waiting in the lobby. "It's worse than we expected," he said quietly, but still within a manageable range. "Organize an all-hands meeting," I said. "Right now." The conference room was packed, not just with managers, but with team leads as well. Everyone fell silent as I entered. I stood before them without any documents, without a prepared speech. "I know you're all worried," I began, "and I'm not going to reassure you with empty promises. No one spoke. The situation right now is difficult. We will lose some contracts. We may have to cut costs, and it's possible there will be major changes. A few people looked down. But there's one thing I want you all to understand. I paused, looking at each of them. What's happening now is not the end. It's the consequence of what was ignored in the past. The room grew heavy, but the chaos subsided. We can't choose our past, but we can choose how to face it. One person spoke up, their voice trembling slightly. Mr. Reed, if things get worse, can the company survive? I looked at him. I won't promise what I'm not sure of, I said. But I will do everything I can to save it, and if we have to fall, we will fall standing. That statement silenced the room. There was no applause, no strong reaction, but I saw something different in their eyes, not complete faith, but acceptance. The meeting ended. People dispersed without huddling together to whisper as they had before. Peter came over. Do you think they'll stick with us? I don't know, I said. But at least they didn't walk out. That afternoon, I received a call from a major partner. The voice on the other end was polite but clear. We appreciate your transparency, Alex, but under the current circumstances, we must suspend our partnership until things stabilize. I understand, I replied. I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together again in the future. I hope so too, he said. I hung up, not surprised. I had anticipated this. What I hadn't anticipated was the next call from someone I never expected. Anna, I answered the phone. Are you busy? Her voice was soft, but there was something different about it. I'm free. I'm near your office. Come up, I said. A little while later, Anna walked into my office. She didn't speak immediately, just sat down and looked at me for a moment. You look different, she said. Different how? Calmer. I smiled faintly. Maybe because I'm not hiding anything anymore. Anna nodded. I saw the news. What did you think? I asked. I wasn't surprised, she said. But I didn't think you would go that far. I looked at her. Do you think it was wrong? Anna shook her head. No, she said slowly. It's just, the price is so high. I know, I replied. But if I don't pay it, it will become even higher. Anna was quiet for a moment. Have you thought about stopping? The question caught me off guard. Stopping? Yes, she said. Not going back to how things were, but not pushing any further. I understood what she meant. The audio recording was out, but there were still details that hadn't been fully clarified. If I continued, more things would be dragged into the light. I can't, I said, because if I stop halfway, everything I've done becomes meaningless. Anna looked at me, not in opposition, but not entirely at ease either. I'm just afraid you'll lose more than you think. I've already lost, I said. What's left is to see if what remains is worth keeping. That statement silenced Anna. A moment later, she stood up. I won't advise you anymore, she said. But if there's ever a time you need to stop, don't think of it as a failure. I nodded. I understand. She left, leaving a familiar emptiness behind. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Just one line. If you continue, someone will pay the price. I stared at the message for a long time. No name, no further information, but I understood this was no longer just about the company. I called Peter. We have a problem, I said. I just received a threatening message. Peter was silent for a second. Who do you think it is? Not sure, I said. But it's not an outsider. What are you going to do? Increase security and prepare for the worst. I understand, Peter said. I hung up and looked at my phone again. The message was still there, short, but enough to make one hesitate. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair. The old me might have wavered, but not anymore. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had come too far to turn back. Sometimes you don't move forward, because you're brave, but because you have no other choice. Outside the window, the city lights burned on. Inside, things were slowly coming into focus, layer by layer. And I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew I wouldn't stop. The threatening text didn't go away overnight. The next morning, when I arrived, At the office, Peter was already waiting. "Mr. Reed, I checked that number," he said, placing a file on my desk. "It's a burner phone. Untraceable." I nodded. I expected as much, but there's something else. Peter's gaze hardened. "Someone broke into the old archives last night." I looked up. "Which one?" "The section with documents from before 2010. My heart sank. "Anything missing?" "We're still assessing, but the system logs show unauthorized access. The hallway camera was disabled for exactly 12 minutes. I didn't need him to say more. I knew what they were looking for. Anything related to the old incident. "Seal off that area," I said, "and back up all the pressed data immediately." "Already done," Peter replied. "Good." I stood up and walked to the window. The city outside was the same, but inside, I knew things were shifting. This was no longer a public relations battle. This was a confrontation. Around noon, I got a call from my mother. "Alex, are you at the office?" "Yes." Her voice was slower than usual. "Some men came to the house this morning." I froze. "Who?" "They didn't say," she replied. "Just that they were old friends of your father's." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did they do?" "They just asked some questions, then made a few comments." "What kind of comments?" My mother hesitated, as if choosing her words. "They said some things are better, left buried." A chill went down my spine. "Did they do anything to you?" "No," she said. "But I have a bad feeling." I took a deep breath. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for any strangers." "Okay," she replied. "Don't worry about me. I just wanted you to know." "I'll come home tonight," I said. "No need." My mother's voice softened. "You do your work. I'm fine." I didn't answer right away. "Okay." I hung up, but my mind was not at ease. I turned to Peter. "Someone went to my mother's house." Peter frowned. "A threat?" "It's not clear," I said. "But it's not a coincidence." Peter thought for a moment. "Do you want to arrange for security?" "Not yet," I said. "But keep an eye on things." "I'll take care of it," Peter said. That evening, I went home earlier than usual. My mother was sitting in the portinyard, living room under the soft yellow light. She looked at me without surprise. "You're home?" "Yes." I sat across from her. "Tell me what happened." My mother sighed softly. Two men in their 50s. Well-dressed, but they didn't seem like normal visitors. They said they knew your father from way back. I was silent. "They didn't give their names," she continued. "Just asked how things were, and then said you were doing something you shouldn't." I clenched my fists. "Were you scared?" My mother looked at me, her gaze gentle but firm. "A little, but I don't want to you to stop because of me." Her words caught in my throat. "I won't stop," I said, "but I'll be more careful." My mother nodded. "Do what you have to do," she said. "But remember one thing. What's right is not always easy, and sometimes you're not the only one who pays the price." I bowed my head. "I understand." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, rereading the documents from the archive. Every page, every line, every number and note pieced together a picture I had only seen a fraction of before, and among them were names I never expected. Not just former executives, but people who were still here, still working, still hiding in the shadows. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Everything was clearer now and more dangerous. My phone buzzed. A new text, this time from Michael Caine's son. "I think you should know. Someone is trying to erase all traces of the old project. Not just inside the company." I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Do you know who?" A moment later, a new message arrived. "I'm not sure, but you should be careful of the people you think are safe." I put my phone down. The advice wasn't new, but in this context, it felt much heavier. I stood up and walked out onto the balcony. The night air was cool. The city was still bright, still noisy, as if nothing was wrong. But I knew beneath that calm facade, many things were in motion, and I was in the middle of it, no longer an observer, but a participant. I looked out at the lights stretching to the horizon. There are some roads no one wants to take, but once you're on them, you can't turn back. And I was more than halfway there. Ahead of me was not just the truth, but the people who would do anything to keep it hidden. I took a deep breath and went back inside. On the desk, the files lay silent but heavy. I knew that from tomorrow on, things would get even more intense. But I also knew I had no other choice but to keep going. The next morning, I stayed home a little longer, staring at the files on my desk. Without opening them, I needed to organize my thoughts. Some truths are easy to accept as data, but when pieced together into a complete picture, they become a choice. And choices always come with a price. My mother passed by and saw me. "You haven't left yet? I'm going now." I stood and gathered the documents. She looked at me for a moment. "You found something, didn't you?" "I didn't hide it, yes." "Is it serious?" I nodded slightly. She didn't press further, only said, "The closer you get to the truth, the clearer your head needs to be." I looked at her and nodded. "I know." Her words stayed with me all the way to the office. When I walked in, Peter was already there. "Mr. Reed, I just got a report from the legal department." He handed me a file. "There are signs of serious violations in the approval process for that project." I opened it and read quickly. It wasn't entirely new, but this time it was clearer, with more evidence. "Can we assign liability?" I asked. Peter shook his head. "It's difficult. It's been too long. Some people have retired. Others have moved on. But legally, if we have more evidence, we could reopen it." I nodded. "Keep digging." "Yes, sir." Peter hesitated. "Mr. Reed, one more thing." "What is it?" "Your Uncle Howard wants to see you." I wasn't surprised. "Where?" "The private meeting room." I stood up. "I'm on my way." The room was at the end of the hall, seldom used. When I walked in, Uncle Howard was already seated. He didn't stand, just looked at me. "Sit." I pulled up a chair across from him. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Finally, he spoke. "You've gone too far, Alex." His voice was no longer sharp, but heavier. "That depends on your perspective," I replied. "I think I'm doing the right thing." "Right or wrong doesn't matter," he said. "What matters are the consequences." "I accept the consequences." I looked straight at him. Uncle Howard sighed. "You're just like your father in that way." That comment made me pause. "Your father also believed he could fix everything." He continued. "And look what happened." I said nothing. "Do you think that audio recording is everything?" he asked. "Or do you think the people in it will just sit back and let you expose it all?" "I don't think they'll sit back," I said, "but I'm not planning on stopping." "Either." Uncle Howard stared at me for a long time. "Do you know that some of those names belong to people still working in this very company?" "I know," I replied. "And you're just letting them stay?" "There isn't enough evidence to act yet," I said. "But there will be, sooner or later." A long silence. Uncle Howard leaned back in his chair, his expression weary. "Have you ever considered that your father wasn't the only one responsible?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. "Some decisions aren't made by one person, and some people, their names aren't on the paper, but they're the ones who really decide." My heart slowed. "Who are you talking about?" Uncle Howard looked at me, then away. "You don't need to know yet," he said. "Because when you do, you might not be able to maintain the same perspective you have now." I clenched my fists. "I don't need to maintain a perspective," I said. "I need the truth." That answer silenced him. After a moment, he stood up. "If that's your decision," he said slowly, "then I won't stand in your way anymore." I stood up as well. "I'm not asking for your support, Uncle. I'm just asking you not to stand on the other side." Uncle Howard gave a faint, unreadable smile. Sometimes, not choosing a side is a choice in itself. He walked out, leaving me alone in the room. His words were vague, but they made me think for a long time. There are people who don't do wrong directly, but they don't stop it either, and they are often the hardest to confront. That afternoon, I got a text from Michael Caine's son. "Do you have time?" "I need to see you," I replied immediately. "Where?" "An old coffee shop near the construction site from that year." I looked at the message, then stood up. I drove to the address he sent. The shop was small and not crowded. He was already sitting in a corner. I walked over. "Have you been waiting long?" "No, I just got here," he said. I sat down. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away, just pulled a thin stack of papers from his pocket. "I found this." He placed it on the table. I opened it. It was a list of names of everyone who attended that meeting years ago. But what made me stop was a name at the very bottom, not a member of the leadership, with no clear title, but with a small note next to it. Final. Approver. I looked at him. "Where did you get this?" "I didn't get it," he said. "I kept it." But back then, I didn't understand what it meant. I looked at the paper again. I knew the name. Not a stranger, but someone I had never suspected. Someone still close. Very close. "Do you understand now?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, but in my mind everything started to click. The unexplained decisions, the missing documents, the people without official titles who held all the influence. I folded the paper and put it down. "Thank you." He looked at me. "What are you going to do?" I looked straight at him. "Keep going. Even if it's him?" I know, I cut him off. "And because it is, I can't stop." He gave a slight nod. "Then you should be prepared." "I am," I said, "but it's probably still not enough." I stood up, taking the paper with me. Walking out of the shop, I felt it more clearly than ever. This wasn't just about the past. It was about the present. Not just about those who had left, but those who remained. And this time, the story wasn't just about right and wrong. It was about confronting people I had once trusted. I paused outside, watching the traffic. Some truths, before you know them, you can be at peace. But once you know, there's no going back. I took a deep breath and kept walking. The road ahead might be harder than anything I had ever faced, but I knew I hadn't come this far just to stop. I brought the paper back to the office without looking at it again. I needed to keep a clear head. Some truths, if you stare at them too long, can make you lose your composure before you have a chance to act. When I walked into my office, Peter took one look at me and knew something was wrong. "Mr. Reed, is everything okay?" I put the paper on the desk. "No," I said. "And this time, it's not about the past anymore." Peter didn't ask, just waited. I opened the paper and pushed it toward him. "Read this." Peter picked it up, scanned the first few lines, and then his eyes froze at the bottom of the page. I saw his expression change. "This," he looked up. "Are you? Tu sûr?" "I'm not absolutely sure," I said, "but it's enough that I can't ignore it." Peter was silent for a few seconds. "Are you going to confront him directly?" "I have no other choice," I replied. "But not now. We have to prepare." Peter nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Review every file related to this person," I said. "Official and internal. And keep it absolutely confidential." "I understand," Peter said. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. This was no longer about facing a faceless system. It was about confronting a specific person. Someone I had trusted. Someone who was still here. That evening, my phone rang. It was my Uncle Howard. "Alex, are you at the office?" "Yes. Can you come over to my house tonight?" But low, as if he had made a decision. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," he said. "And I think you should hear it from me before you go any further." I paused for a second. "Okay, I'll be there." I hung up and looked at Peter. "I have to go out for a bit." "Where?" "To see my uncle." Peter frowned. "Be careful." "I know," I said. "But this time, I think he's going to talk." My uncle's house was in a quiet neighborhood, away from the city center. I arrived just after dark. The door opened as soon as I rang the bell. "Uncle?" Howard stood there, not speaking, just nodding. "Come in." I stepped inside. The house was the same as always, but the atmosphere was different, not wary, but heavy. We sat across from each other in the living room. Finally, he spoke. "You know, don't you?" I was direct. "I know his name." Uncle Howard nodded. "Then I don't need to hide it anymore." He sighed. "The final approver wasn't your father." Even though I was prepared, I felt my heart sink. "Then who was it?" I asked. Uncle Howard looked at me for a long time, as if weighing each word. "It was Mr. Sterling. The name made me freeze, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was too familiar. Mr. Sterling, the company's former senior advisor, the man my father had always trusted, the man who had helped build the company from its early days. That's impossible, I said softly. He never had an executive title. True, Uncle Howard said. But he had power, the kind of power that doesn't need a title. I was silent. It all started to fit. The unexplained decisions, why my father had agreed, why everything was settled so quickly afterward. Did my father know? I asked. Uncle Howard looked down. He knew. A long silence. Then why? I couldn't finish the sentence. Because he trusted him, Uncle Howard said. He believed it was the only way to save the company. And he believed things wouldn't go any further. I clenched my fists. But they did. Yes, he said. And now you're bringing it all to light. I looked straight at him. Is Mr. Sterling still involved? Uncle Howard didn't answer right away. He retired from the company a long time ago, but his influence never really left. The answer was clear enough. I leaned back in my chair, feeling as if everything had just been turned upside down. This wasn't just a mistake from one moment in time. It was a system that had been in place for a long, long time. You called me here to stop me? I asked. Uncle Howard shook his head. No, he said. I called you here so you would know who you're up against. I was silent. I'm still going to continue, I said. No matter who it is. Uncle Howard nodded slightly. I know, he said, because you're like you're a father. But there's one thing you need to understand. He looked straight at me. Your father chose silence to protect everything. You're choosing to speak out, to change it. Neither choice comes without a price. I bowed my head. I know. Then see it through to the end, Uncle Howard said. Don't stop halfway. It wasn't an obstacle, it was an acceptance. I stood up. Thank you, Uncle. He said nothing more, just nodded. I left his house and stepped out into the night. The air was colder than I thought, but my mind was clearer than ever. Mr. Sterling, a name, a person, and perhaps the beginning of it all. I got in my car, but didn't start it right away. I sat for a moment looking at the road ahead. Some truths, once you can name them, make everything simpler. Not easier, but clearer. I took out my phone and called Peter. I know, I said. It's Mr. Sterling. A few seconds of silence on the other end. So, what now? Prepare the final act, I said. This time, it's not just an announcement. It's an ending. I hung up and started the car. I knew the next part would be the word. Hardest, but also the most necessary. Because some stories can only truly end when you see them through to the very last page. I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, the hallways empty, the yellow lights casting long, silent shadows. There was a strange feeling in the air, like the calm before a big storm. You know, something is about to happen. I opened my office door, set down my briefcase, and sat for a moment, not to think, but to make sure I was ready. Around 8 a.m., Peter came in. He didn't say much, just placed a thick file in front of me. It's all here. I opened it and skimmed through the pages. There were no more gaps, no more question marks. Everything connected into a clear, straight line, from the decisions made years ago to the consequences that followed. And finally, the trail of Mr. Sterling. I nodded. The meeting is at 9. Peter looked at me. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. It's time to end this. At 9 o'clock sharp, the main conference room was full. The leadership team, department heads, people who had been with the company for years, everyone was there. The tension was thick. I walked in and stood at my usual spot, but today, I felt different. I was no longer a seeker. I was the one about to speak the Luderby truth. I looked around the room. I saw curiosity, anxiety, and a few averted gazes. I began. Thank you all for being here. My voice was quiet, but it carried. I know there has been a lot of uncertainty lately. Today, I will provide the answers. The room was completely silent. I opened the file and projected it onto the Screen. Data points, timelines, signatures appeared one by one. No one interrupted. No one objected. There was nothing left to object to. When I got to the last page, I said, "The person who gave the final approval was not my father." A murmur went through the room. I continued. "It was Mr. Sterling." The name hung in the air, and the room seemed to freeze. Some people looked up, some looked down, some sighed. I didn't stop. "I know he did a great deal for this company. I know many of you here trusted him, but the truth doesn't change because of our beliefs." I looked at them. Wrong decisions were made, and we are living with the consequences. After a long pause, a board member spoke. "But Mr. Sterling retired a long time ago." "True," I said. "But what he left behind remains from the way we operate to the Luna, the gaps in our oversight." I placed my hands on the table, and most importantly, we have been silent for too long. No one said anything. I took a breath. "I'm not here today to place blame. I'm here to end it," I signaled to Peter. He stepped forward and presented the new plan, a new system of controls, transparent and clear, to prevent any single individual from holding that much unchecked power again. I continued. "We cannot change the past, but we can decide our future." The expressions in the room began to change. The anxiety was replaced by consideration. Then, one person stood up. "I agree." Another followed. "I do, too." One by one, quietly but firmly. The meeting concluded after 2 hours. There were no major arguments, no conflicts, just a truth that was accepted and a new path forward that was begun. When everyone had left, I remained seated. Peter stood beside me. "It's over," he said softly. I looked out the window. "Not yet, but we've passed the hardest part." Peter nodded. "What's next?" I didn't answer right away. That afternoon, I went home. The house was the same, everything in its place, but the feeling inside me was different. I went to my father's study. The room had been mostly untouched since he passed away. I sat in the chair he used to sit in and looked around. Some things were familiar, others I had never understood. I took the old files from my briefcase and placed them on his desk. "Dad," I said softly, "I've done my part." No one answered, but I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had stopped running. I didn't know what the father would have thought if he were still alive, if he would have been angry or silent, like he used to be. But one thing I believed was that he would have understood, because in the end, I was just trying to do the right thing. That evening, I had dinner with my mother. She didn't ask many questions, just looked at me and said, "Are you tired?" I smiled faintly. "A little." She placed a piece of fish on my plate. "No matter what you do, you have to take care of yourself." I nodded. "I know. Some words are so simple, but they're enough to remind you who you are." After dinner, I went out onto the porch. The air was cool, the wind gentle, the heavy feeling from the past few weeks was gone. Peter called. "Are you okay?" "Sit?" "I'm okay," I replied. "There's still a lot of work to do." "Yes," he said, "but at least we didn't turn back." I smiled. "No, we didn't." I hung up and looked at the sky. Some stories, if not seen through to the end, will always feel unfinished. And some truths, if not spoken, will always be a burden. I chose to speak, I accepted the price, and in return, I found a kind of peace. Not an end to all difficulties, but an end to self-doubt. Life would go on, the company would change, people would change. But I knew that from today, everything would start on a different foundation, one that was clearer and right. I stood up and went inside. The door closed behind me. An old chapter had ended. A new one was beginning, and this time I wouldn't let myself have any regrets.